Beloved friend, if you are listening right now, there is a good chance the world around you has finally gone quiet, but your inner world has not, and in this stillness, the things you have been carrying all day begin to speak more clearly. Some of you may feel a heaviness that does not come from one single problem, but from the slow accumulation of expectations, responsibilities, and unspoken fears that have followed you for a long time. You may feel tired in a way that sleep alone has not been able to fix, because the exhaustion is not only in your body, but in your heart and your mind. There is a kind of weight that comes from always trying to move forward while feeling as though something unseen is pulling you back, something you cannot fully explain, but something you feel every time you try to hope again. You may feel like you have done what you were supposed to do. You tried to be faithful. You tried to be patient. You tried to make wise choices, and yet you still find yourself wondering why your inner world feels so restricted, so tense, so guarded. Some of you have been strong for so long that you do not even remember what it feels like to fully relax, to stop bracing yourself for the next disappointment, the next delay, or the next season of waiting. You may feel caught between the desire to believe that things can change and the fear that nothing really will, that this sense of being stuck is simply how life is going to be. In the quiet of this hour, those thoughts tend to surface gently but persistently, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you that something inside you longs for freedom, for release, for a way of living that feels lighter and more aligned with peace. Some of you may be carrying silent questions that you rarely say out loud. Questions like, why progress feels so slow, why old patterns keep returning, or why your heart reacts the same way even when you promise yourself you will respond differently next time. You may feel as though there are invisible chains formed not by one dramatic event, but by years of small moments where fear spoke louder than trust, where survival mattered more than rest, and where control felt safer than surrender. This is not something you chose deliberately. It is something you learned gradually, often without realizing it, as you tried to protect yourself from pain or failure. Now, as night settles in and there is nothing left to distract you, you may sense that you do not want to continue carrying this into another season of your life. You may not be looking for instant answers or dramatic breakthroughs, but for something much quieter and deeper, a sense that you are no longer trapped inside the same emotional loops, the same anxious thoughts, the same guarded responses. Some of you may feel conflicted because part of you wants to let go, while another part is afraid of what might happen if you do. Letting go can feel risky when you have relied on tension and control for so long. You may wonder who you would be without this constant pressure, without this need to anticipate every possible outcome. In this hour, you do not need to solve those questions, and you do not need to force yourself into clarity. This moment is not asking you to fix anything, but simply to acknowledge that the weight you are carrying is real, and that you were never meant to carry it alone. You may feel a quiet ache for something different, not a perfect life, not a life without challenges, but a life where your soul is not constantly bracing itself, where peace does not feel temporary or fragile. Some of you may be listening with a guarded heart, unsure whether anything can truly change, yet still hoping, even if that hope feels very small. That small hope matters more than you realize, because it is a sign that your heart has not given up, even if it feels tired. In this quiet space, you are not being asked to pretend you are okay, and you are not being judged for feeling weary or restricted. You are simply being invited to sit with the truth of where you are, without pressure, without shame, without needing to perform strength. This is a safe place to admit that you are longing for freedom, even if you do not yet know what that freedom looks like or how it might come. Right now, nothing is required of you except honesty and presence. You do not need to rush forward, and you do not need to look back with regret. This moment exists simply to remind you that the weight you feel has been seen, that your longing for release is understood, and that you are allowed to pause here, are in the quiet before taking another step. Beloved friend, as you stay here a little longer in this quiet hour, you may begin to realize that what you are feeling is not weakness and it is not failure. Some of you may feel ashamed for feeling stuck or restricted, as if you should be stronger by now, wiser by now, more settled by now. But the truth is, many faithful people carry heavy inner burdens while continuing to show up for life, for work, for family, and for others. You may feel like no one really sees how much effort it takes just to keep going, how much energy it costs to stay composed, to stay hopeful, to stay functional when your heart feels tired. Some of you have been patient for a long time, longer than you ever expected, and patience that lasts that long can quietly turn into exhaustion if it is never given space to rest. You may feel discouraged because the change you hoped for has not arrived yet, or because progress feels so slow that it almost feels invisible. That can make you question yourself, wondering if you are doing something wrong, or if you missed something important along the way. You may feel pressure to have answers, to know what step comes next, even when your inner world feels foggy and uncertain. In moments like this, it is easy to believe that you are alone in these thoughts, but many people listening right now are carrying similar questions in silence. Some of you may feel conflicted because you still believe in goodness and possibility, yet your heart feels guarded from disappointment. You may want to hope, but not too much, because hoping deeply in the past may have led to pain. And that tension between hope and self-protection can feel exhausting, like living with one foot forward and one foot braced to pull back. If that sounds familiar, there is nothing wrong with you. It simply means you have learned how to survive seasons that were heavy and uncertain. Survival skills can keep you going, but they are not always meant to be permanent ways of living. You may also feel discouraged by patterns you recognize in yourself, patterns you promised would change, reactions you hoped would soften, fears you thought you had already overcome. Seeing those patterns return can make you feel defeated, as if all your effort has been wasted. But growth is rarely a straight line, and returning struggles do not erase the progress you have already made. They often reveal the places that still need gentleness rather than judgment. Some of you may be quietly carrying guilt, believing that if you had more faith, more clarity, or more discipline, you would not feel this way. That belief can become another burden, making you feel like your inner struggle is a personal flaw. But feeling restricted does not mean you lack faith, and feeling tired does not mean you lack devotion. It means you are human, navigating real pressures and real uncertainty in a world that often asks too much. You may also feel lonely in this season, even if you are surrounded by people, because inner struggles are hard to explain and even harder to feel understood. You may worry that if you speak honestly about how you feel, you will be misunderstood, minimized, or encouraged to just push harder. That can make silence feel safer, even though silence can make the weight feel heavier over time. In this moment, you are not being asked to push harder or to explain yourself. You are being reminded that what you are experiencing makes sense in the context of what you have lived through. You are allowed to feel tired without needing to justify it. You're allowed to feel unsure without needing to resolve everything right now. Some of you may be holding on to a quiet desire for reassurance, not reassurance that everything will be easy, but reassurance that you are not falling behind, that you are not broken, and that your life is not quietly slipping off course. That desire for reassurance is not something to dismiss. It is something to acknowledge with compassion. You may be in a season where clarity has not arrived yet, where answers feel delayed, and where direction feels less obvious than it once did. That does not mean you are lost. It means you are in between. And in-between spaces can feel uncomfortable precisely because they require trust without immediate certainty. Some of you may feel pressure to make the right choices for the future, fearing that one wrong decision could trap you further or close doors permanently. That pressure can make even small decisions feel overwhelming. In this hour, you are not being asked to solve your future. You are being encouraged to recognize that you are allowed to take life one step at a time, one breath at a time, without having to carry the entire outcome on your shoulders. You may feel relief simply hearing that your struggle does not disqualify you, and that your weariness does not make you less worthy of peace. If your heart feels tender right now, that is not something to hide. Tenderness is often a sign that something within you is opening, even if it feels uncomfortable. You do not need to rush through this space or hurry toward resolution. This moment exists to remind you that you are seen in your effort, understood in your waiting, and valued even when you feel unsure. You are not behind, you are not failing, and you are not alone in this season. Right now, it is enough to stay present, to breathe slowly, and then to allow yourself to receive encouragement without needing to earn it. Beloved friend, sometimes Scripture brings comfort through short promises, and other times it brings reassurance through stories. Quiet stories about people who lived for a long time under heavy restrictions before freedom gently entered their lives. Some of you may feel connected to these stories because your own journey has not been sudden or dramatic, but slow, layered and shaped by long seasons of endurance. One such story speaks to the reality of being bound for years and then being seen at just the right moment. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verse 10 through verse 17, we encounter a woman whose life had been shaped by limitation for 18 long years. She was not described by her dreams or talents, but by what restrained her, a condition that kept her bent over, unable to stand fully upright. Day after day, her world was shaped by this restriction, and over time it likely became normal, even expected, both by herself and by others. She did not come to be healed. She came to worship, to be present, to remain faithful in the space she knew. That detail matters because it reminds us that many people live faithfully even while feeling bound inside. She did not cry out for attention, she did not demand change, and she did not announce her suffering, yet she was seen. Jesus noticed her without being asked, and that alone carries deep meaning for those who feel overlooked in their quiet endurance. When he called her forward, it was not to question her faith or explain her condition, but to speak freedom into a place that had known restraint for nearly 2 decades. He did not rush her or shame her for being bent. He acknowledged her dignity before her freedom fully manifested. For those listening who have lived with long-standing inner restrictions, this story gently challenges the belief that time cancels hope. 18 years did not disqualify her from change, and long endurance did not make her invisible. When freedom came, it came without accusation, without blame, and without spectacle. It came through presence, attention, and a word spoken at the right moment. Some of you may recognize yourselves in her story, not because your circumstances look the same, but because your inner posture has been shaped by years of adapting to limitation. You may have learned how to live bent inward, guarding your expectations, adjusting your dreams, and managing disappointment quietly. Another story speaks to the weight of invisible chains, a chains not made of circumstance alone, but of inner turmoil and isolation. In the Gospel of Mark chapter 5, verse 1 through verse 20, we read about a man who lived separated from others, restrained not only by his condition, but by how people responded to it. He lived among tombs, away from community, defined by what could not be controlled or contained. Attempts to restrain him externally had failed, and over time he became known more for his disruption than his humanity. Yet when Jesus arrived, the story shifted. Jesus did not approach him with fear or avoidance, and he did not reduce him to his behavior. He engaged him directly, restoring dignity before restoration became visible. After freedom came, the man was found sitting, clothed, and in his right mind, a powerful image for those who long not just for relief, but for inner order and peace. This transformation was not loud or chaotic. It was deeply grounding. The man did not need to explain himself or prove his change. His posture alone told a new story. Some of you may feel as though your inner world has been restless for a long time, thoughts racing, emotions unpredictable, and peace difficult to sustain. This story reminds us that freedom is not only about removing restraint, but about restoring wholeness, about being able to sit calmly within yourself without fear of losing control. There is also a quieter story of freedom that comes through rest rather than dramatic change. In the first book of Kings, chapter 19, verse 4 through verse 8, we encounter Elijah, not in victory, but in exhaustion. After intense pressure and fear, he sat down and asked to stop, feeling depleted and overwhelmed. Instead of correction or instruction, he was met with rest, nourishment, and gentle care. He was allowed to sleep, to eat, and to recover before any conversation about direction or purpose resumed. This story speaks deeply to those who feel bound by burnout, by emotional depletion, or by the belief that they must keep going without pause. When freedom in this moment did not come through action, but through permission to rest, Elijah's strength was restored not by effort, but by care, reminding us that some chains loosen only when the body and soul are allowed to recover. Across these stories, a common thread emerges. Freedom does not arrive through force, urgency, or explanation. It arrives through being seen, through presence, and through timing that respects the human heart. None of these individuals were rushed, and none were required to justify their condition before freedom came. Their stories gently remind us that long seasons of restriction do not cancel the possibility of change, and quiet endurance does not go unnoticed. As you listen, you are not being asked to compare your story or measure your suffering. You are simply invited to recognize that Scripture consistently speaks to people who have lived with limitations, and it speaks with patience rather than pressure. These stories exist not to demand belief, but to offer reassurance that freedom often begins when someone is finally seen, cared for, and allowed to receive without striving. Beloved friend, when we sit with these stories long enough, something subtle begins to happen inside us. Not a sudden realization, but a quiet shift in how we see our own lives. The people in these stories were not introduced as heroes, and they were not praised for their endurance or corrected for their limitations. They were simply met where they were, and that alone begins to change how we understand our own waiting. Many of you listening tonight may recognize that you have learned how to live around your restrictions rather than through them. You have adapted. You have adjusted your expectations. You have learned which hopes feel safer to keep small and which questions feel better left unasked. Over time, those adjustments can feel normal, even responsible. Until one night you realize how much energy it takes just to stay in that posture. The stories we reflected on do not shame that adaptation. They acknowledge it. They quietly reveal that long-standing patterns, whether physical, emotional, or mental, do not define the full story of a person's life. The woman who lived bent over did not wake up each day planning to be restricted. She learned how to function within it. In the same way, some of you have learned how to function within anxiety, within pressure, within constant self-monitoring. You may not even call it bondage anymore. You just call it being realistic. The gentle truth is that realism can sometimes become a softer name for resignation. These stories do not confront resignation aggressively. They simply introduce the possibility that something else exists. When Jesus noticed people, he did not begin with instruction. He began with attention. That matters for those of you who feel unseen in your quiet effort. Attention communicates worth before change ever happens. In your own life, you may feel like change has been delayed because you are doing something wrong, or because you have not been strong enough, faithful enough, or clear enough. But the pattern in these stories suggests something different. It suggests that timing is not punishment, and delay is not neglect. Sometimes the most meaningful shifts occur not when someone fights harder, but when someone is finally allowed to stop bracing. The man who lived in isolation did not regain peace by learning better techniques or gaining more self-control. Peace returned when chaos was met with presence rather than fear. Many of you may be dealing with inner restlessness that feels similar, racing thoughts, emotional volatility, or a constant sense of being on edge. You may have tried to manage it through discipline, distraction, or self-criticism. Those efforts may help temporarily, but they rarely bring deep rest. The story gently reframes the issue, suggesting that what restores order is not force, but safety. When safety enters, the nervous system settles. When safety remains, clarity follows. This matters deeply for people who have lived in survival mode for a long time. Survival mode is useful in crisis, but exhausting as a lifestyle. Some of you have been surviving for years, even while appearing successful or composed. You have learned how to keep moving, how to stay functional, how to meet expectations. The cost of that survival often shows up late at night when the noise fades and your body no longer has to perform. That is often when the weight feels heaviest. The story of Elijah speaks directly to those moments. He was not corrected for his exhaustion. He was not reminded of his calling. He was fed. He was allowed to sleep. Only after rest was restored did direction become possible again. This challenges a very common belief that many of you carry, the belief that you must push through fatigue to earn clarity. The narrative suggests the opposite, that clarity often comes after rest, not before it. In your own life, you may be waiting for motivation, confidence, or certainty to return before allowing yourself to slow down. But what if slowing down is the very thing that allows those qualities to reemerge? Gentle teaching does not tell you what to do. It invites you to notice what resonates. You may notice that your inner world feels tight because it has not been given permission to loosen. You may notice that you have associated rest with irresponsibility, stillness with stagnation, and softness with weakness. The stories quietly dismantle those assumptions by showing strength expressed through surrender, not through strain. They reveal a pattern where restoration begins not with effort, but with being met. In your daily life, this might look very ordinary. It might look like noticing how often you hold your breath without realizing it. It might look like recognizing how quickly you move into problem-solving mode when discomfort arises. It might look like acknowledging that you rarely let yourself sit with uncertainty without immediately trying to fix it. These habits are not moral failures. They are learned responses. Gentle teaching does not demand that you abandon them overnight. It simply opens space to question whether they are still serving you. You may begin to see that some of the inner change you feel are not imposed by external forces, but reinforced by patterns that once protected you. Letting go of those patterns can feel threatening at first because they have been familiar companions. The idea of living without constant vigilance can feel risky. The stories do not minimize that fear. They simply show that fear does not get the final say. Another important thread in these narratives is dignity. Before change occurred, dignity was affirmed. That is significant for anyone who feels defined by what they struggle with. You may have internalized labels about yourself: anxious, unstable, behind, not enough. Those labels can become cages of their own. The stories suggest that identity precedes freedom, not the other way around. You are not freed in order to become worthy. You are addressed as worthy, and freedom flows from that recognition. In practical terms, this means you do not need to fix yourself before allowing compassion toward yourself. You do not need to resolve every issue before allowing rest. You do not need to understand everything before allowing trust. Gentle narrative teaching does not push you toward an outcome. It walks alongside you, reminding you that the path toward freedom is often quiet, gradual, and deeply personal. What you may not notice dramatic changes right away. You may simply notice that you react a little less intensely, that you pause a little longer before spiraling, that your inner voice softens slightly. Those are not small things. They are signs that something is loosening. As you listen tonight, you are not being asked to apply a lesson or make a commitment. You are being invited to see your life through a lens that allows patience instead of pressure. The stories whisper that you are not late, not defective, and not beyond care. They suggest that freedom often arrives not as an interruption, but as a gentle reorientation, a slow return to uprightness, to calmness, to rest. And that return begins not with striving, but with being willing to be met right where you are. Beloved friend, as these stories and reflections settle into your heart, the question that naturally begins to surface is not what you should believe more strongly, but how this way of being might quietly take shape in your everyday life. Application at this hour is not about adding more effort or setting new standards for yourself, but about noticing where your life has become tight and where it might be allowed to soften. Some of you may recognize that the first place restriction shows up is in your body long before it shows up in your thoughts. You may notice tension in your shoulders, your jaw, or your breathing, especially when you think about work, responsibilities, or the future. A very real and gentle application is simply learning to notice that tension without immediately trying to fix it. When you pause and acknowledge it, you interrupt the automatic cycle of bracing that keeps your body in a constant state of alert. This small pause is not passive, it is a quiet act of trust. In your daily routines, you may notice that you rush even when there is no real urgency, moving quickly from one task to the next as if stillness might cause something to fall apart. Application here might look like choosing one moment in your day to slow down intentionally, perhaps while eating, walking, or preparing for rest, allowing your nervous system to learn that nothing bad happens when you are not rushing. Some of you may feel restricted by the way your mind immediately jumps to worst-case scenarios. You may replay conversations, anticipate problems that have not happened, or rehearse explanations you may never need to give. This pattern often develops as a form of self-protection, but over time it becomes exhausting. A gentle application is learning to recognize when your mind has shifted into rehearsal mode and to respond with kindness rather than criticism. Instead of telling yourself to stop thinking, you might simply remind yourself that not every thought requires a response. This creates space between you and the fear without forcing it away. In relationships, some of you may notice that you hold back parts of yourself, not because you do not care, but because vulnerability feels unsafe. You may be kind, helpful, and present, yet guarded when it comes to sharing your true feelings or needs. Application here is not about oversharing or forcing openness, but about allowing yourself to be honest in small, safe ways. And this might mean admitting when you are tired, asking for help without apology, or setting a boundary without excessive explanation. Each of these small actions loosens the internal belief that you must manage everything alone. In your work or responsibilities, you may feel bound by constant pressure to perform, to produce, or to prove your worth. You may equate rest with laziness or fear that slowing down will make you fall behind. A very concrete application is redefining rest not as a reward for productivity, but as a requirement for sustainability. This could mean giving yourself permission to stop working at a certain hour, even if everything is not finished. Trusting that unfinished tasks do not define your value. It could also mean allowing your mind to disengage from problem solving when the day is done, even if solutions have not yet appeared. Some of you may notice that restriction shows up as self-criticism, an inner voice that quickly points out what you should have done differently or why you are not further along. This voice often sounds authoritative, but it rarely produces growth. Application here involves learning to recognize that voice as a habit, not a truth. When it speaks, you might gently question whether it is actually helping you move forward or simply keeping you tense. Replacing self-criticism does not require forced positivity. It begins with neutrality, allowing yourself to observe your experience without immediate judgment. In moments of decision-making, you may feel paralyzed by the fear of choosing incorrectly, believing that one wrong step could lock you into long-term consequences. Application here is learning to shift your focus from making the perfect decision to making a grounded one. This might involve checking in with how a choice feels in your body rather than only analyzing outcomes. Does it bring a sense of calm, even if it is uncomfortable, or does it increase anxiety and pressure? Learning to trust these internal signals can gently guide you out of decision paralysis. Some of you may notice that your evenings are especially difficult, that when external demands fade, your inner world becomes louder. Application at night might look like creating a predictable, calming routine that signals safety to your body, such as dimming lights, limiting stimulation, or engaging in a simple, repetitive activity. These practices are not about control, they are about reassurance. They tell your system that it is safe to rest. You may also notice that you carry guilt when you are not actively improving yourself, as if stillness means stagnation. Application here involves reframing growth as something that can occur in rest as well as in effort. Many internal shifts happen quietly beneath conscious awareness when the mind and body are allowed to settle. Allowing yourself to rest without guilt is not indulgent, it is foundational. In moments when you feel overwhelmed by the size of your struggles, application may simply be choosing to focus on the next manageable step rather than the entire journey. And this might mean addressing what is directly in front of you today and releasing the need to solve tomorrow. Freedom often expands through small, consistent choices rather than dramatic change. You may begin to notice that as you apply these gentle shifts, something subtle changes. You react less automatically, you recover more quickly, you feel moments of ease that were previously rare. These are not signs that everything is fixed. They are signs that something is loosening. Application is not about transforming your life overnight. It is about creating conditions where transformation can occur naturally. You are not being asked to become someone new. You are being invited to return to yourself without the constant weight of tension, fear, or self-protection. This return happens slowly through ordinary moments and through choices that prioritize safety, honesty, and rest. As you practice these applications, remember that progress is not measured by how calm you feel all the time, but by how gently you treat yourself when you are not calm. That gentleness is where freedom quietly begins to take root. Beloved friend, as everything we have reflected on begins to settle, this is the moment where nothing more needs to be added and nothing needs to be solved. This is not the point where you are asked to do something new, but where you are invited to soften into what is already happening. You may notice that your breathing has slowed a little, or that your body feels slightly heavier against the surface beneath you. And if so, that is not something you need to control or adjust. It is simply a sign that you are allowing yourself to be here. This transition is not about switching from thinking to praying in a sudden way, but about letting your inner world gently change posture, from effort to openness, from holding to receiving. You do not need to search for the right words or the right emotions, but you do not need to prepare yourself or make sure your heart is in the correct condition. Prayer at this hour does not begin with speech. It begins with permission. Permission to stop managing, permission to stop explaining, permission to stop carrying what has been heavy for so long. Some of you may feel a quiet resistance here, a subtle hesitation that wonders whether it is safe to open, whether letting go will lead to disappointment or vulnerability. That hesitation is understandable. It often comes from experience, not from lack of faith. You do not need to push past it. You can simply acknowledge it and remain present. Prayer does not require you to be fearless. It only requires you to be honest. As you rest in this space, you may notice thoughts still moving through your mind, reminders of tasks, worries about tomorrow, or questions that have not found answers. You are not doing anything wrong if those thoughts remain. You are not required to empty your mind or silence everything within you. Transitioning into prayer means allowing those thoughts to exist without chasing them, without needing to resolve them right now. They can be there without being in charge. This is a space where you are allowed to be incomplete, uncertain, and unfinished. You may also notice emotions that have been held back beginning to surface gently, not in an overwhelming way, but as a quiet awareness. If you feel sadness, fatigue, longing, or even numbness, you do not need to correct those feelings. They are welcome here. Prayer does not demand a certain emotional tone. It makes room for what is real. At this hour, prayer is not a performance or a task. It is a resting place. When you are not trying to reach upward or strive for something beyond you, you are allowing yourself to be met exactly where you are. You may find it helpful to imagine this moment not as you approaching something distant, but as something already near drawing closer. There is no urgency here. There is no timeline you need to meet. You are not late, and you are not missing anything by slowing down. Some of you may feel an impulse to start asking for things immediately, to list concerns, needs, or hopes, and that impulse is natural, but there is no rush. This transition allows space before words, a space where your heart can settle into trust before requests are formed. You may notice that when you stop pushing yourself to pray in a certain way, something inside you begins to relax. That relaxation is not distraction, it is preparation. It is the soil in which prayer grows quietly. If your body feels tired, you can allow it to be tired. If your eyes feel heavy, you do not need to fight that sensation. This moment does not demand alertness or intensity. It welcomes restfulness. Even if you drift slightly, even if your focus comes and goes, you are still present. Presence does not require constant attention. It requires willingness. You may sense a gentle invitation to trust that you are being held without needing to hold everything together. That trust does not need to be dramatic or emotional. It can be as simple as allowing your shoulders to drop or your jaw to unclench. In this transition, you are not being asked to change your circumstances or your thoughts. You are being invited to change your posture towards them. Instead of standing guard, you are allowed to sit. Instead of bracing, you are allowed to lean. Instead of explaining yourself, you are allowed to be understood without words. This is the place where prayer begins to take shape naturally, not forced, not structured, but responsive. If you feel unsure about how to proceed, that uncertainty is not an obstacle. It is often the doorway. Prayer does not require certainty to begin. It meets you in uncertainty and holds you there. You may feel a quiet awareness that you do not need to carry the next few moments. That you can let them unfold gently. You are not losing control by doing this. You are placing control where it belongs. As you remain here, there is nothing you need to achieve. You are not expected to feel better immediately. You are not expected to understand what is happening. You are simply invited to stay, to remain open, and to allow what comes next to arise naturally. This transition is slow on purpose because your heart has been moving quickly for a long time. It deserves a pace that feels safe. When prayer begins in a moment like this, it does not interrupt your humanity. It honors it. And as you continue to rest here, you may find that prayer is already beginning, quietly, gently, without effort, simply because you have allowed yourself to be here. Beloved friend, in this quiet moment, we gently turn our hearts toward God, not with urgency, not with demands, but with openness and trust. God, we come to you as we are, without fixing ourselves first, without arranging our thoughts into perfect order. You already know the weight we have been carrying, the tension that has lived quietly in our bodies and minds, the places where fear, exhaustion, and long waiting have taken residence. Tonight, we do not try to explain those things away. We simply place them before you, one by one, trusting that you are present with us here. God, some of us have lived for a long time with an inner sense of restriction, feeling unable to fully breathe, fully rest, or fully hope. We may not always know how to describe it, but you see it clearly. You see the guardedness we have learned, the vigilance that has become second nature, the effort it takes just to stay steady. We bring all of that to you now, not as a problem to solve, but as a truth to be held. God, we ask for your gentle nearness, not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that reassures. Meet us in the places where we have been silently strong for too long. Meet us where we have been afraid to let go, because letting go felt unsafe. Meet us where we have been holding tension as a form of protection. We do not ask you to force anything open. We simply ask that your presence would make it safe for what has been closed to begin to soften. God, for those listening who feel tired in their bones, tired in their thoughts, tired in their hearts, we ask for rest that reaches deeper than sleep, rest that settles the nervous system. We rest that quiets the constant scanning for danger or disappointment. Rest that reminds us we are not required to carry everything at once. God, we release to you the pressure we place on ourselves, the belief that we must always be improving, always fixing, always proving something. We lay that pressure down gently, trusting that you do not relate to us through demands, but through care. God, some of us have been carrying fear about the future, fear about making the wrong choices, fear that one mistake could undo everything. We bring that fear to you now, not to argue with it, not to silence it harshly, but to place it in your hands. Help us trust that our lives are not as fragile as fear suggests. Help us believe that you are steady even when our understanding is incomplete. God, when we acknowledge the places in our lives where we have learned to survive rather than to live, the places where we have learned to stay small, stay guarded, stay prepared for loss, we do not judge ourselves for this. We recognize that these patterns once helped us endure. But tonight, we ask that you gently show us where survival is no longer needed, where it is safe to release old defenses and learn a new way of being. God, for those who feel bound by thoughts that repeat endlessly, thoughts of self-doubt, regret, or worry, we ask for quiet space. Not the absence of thought, but the loosening of its grip. Teach us that thoughts can pass without defining us. Teach us that we do not have to answer every fear that speaks. God, we offer you our need for control, the belief that if we stay tense enough, vigilant enough, nothing bad will happen. We acknowledge how exhausting that belief has been. Tonight, we practice surrender in very small ways. We release the outcome of tomorrow. We release the need to anticipate every scenario. We release the idea that rest equals irresponsibility. God, we place our trust not in our ability to manage life, but in your steady care. God, for those carrying emotional pain from the past, my wounds that have shaped how they see themselves and others, we ask for gentle healing, not rushed healing, not forced healing, healing that respects timing, healing that restores safety before it restores strength, healing that reminds us we are not defined by what hurt us. God, for those who feel alone even when surrounded by people, we ask for a sense of being seen without explanation. Let your presence feel personal, attentive, and kind. Let it reach places where words have failed. God, for those who feel disappointed with themselves, who believe they should be further along, more peaceful, more confident by now, we ask for compassion. Help us see ourselves through your eyes, not through the lens of comparison or self-judgment. Remind us that growth is not linear and that gentleness often brings more change than pressure ever could. God, as we remain here with you, we do not ask for dramatic signs or immediate answers. We ask for something quieter and deeper. We ask for a sense of safety, a sense of being held, a sense that we are allowed to rest without fear of what will happen if we stop striving. God, we give you permission to work in us in ways we may not immediately notice, in ways that unfold slowly, in ways that align with our capacity. We trust that you know the pace our hearts can handle. Tonight we choose to stay. We choose to remain open. We choose to release what we can and trust you with what we cannot. God, we place ourselves in your care, not because we are certain, but because we are willing. And in this willingness, we find the beginning of freedom, not loud or forceful, but steady, deep, and real. We rest here, trusting that you are near. Creator, that you are attentive, and that nothing we bring to you tonight is too much or too small. We remain in this quiet surrender, knowing that even now you are at work in ways we do not need to control or understand. Beloved friend, as we remain here in this quiet surrender, we continue to rest our hearts before God, without hurry and without pressure, trusting that what needs care will be cared for in its own time. God, we thank you for the assurance that grows not from certainty, but from your steady presence. Tonight we ask that this assurance would settle deeper than our thoughts, deeper than our emotions, reaching the places where fear has lived quietly for a long time. For those who feel unsure about tomorrow, unsure about direction, unsure about outcomes they cannot control, we ask for a calm confidence that does not depend on answers. Let assurance take shape as a gentle knowing that we are held even when the path ahead is unclear. God, for those carrying wounds that have shaped their self-understanding, and wounds that whisper lies about worth or belonging, we ask for healing that unfolds patiently. We ask for healing that does not reopen pain abruptly, but that slowly restores trust in the body, in relationships, and in the possibility of peace. Touch the places where shame has lingered, where self-blame has taken root, and replace those burdens with compassion that feels believable and safe. God, we bring to you the exhaustion that comes from being constantly alert, constantly evaluating, constantly preparing for what might go wrong. We ask for inner rest that teaches our bodies they do not need to stay on guard. Let muscles soften. Let breathing deepen. Let the rhythm of the heart slow into steadiness. God, for those who have learned to associate rest with danger or guilt, we ask that you gently reframe rest as care, care that sustains life, care that restores clarity, care that allows healing to continue beneath conscious effort. God, we ask for reassurance for those who fear they are falling behind, who worry that life is passing them by while they are still trying to figure things out. Let assurance speak quietly that timing is not punishment and waiting is not wasted. Remind them that growth often happens in unseen ways, beneath the surface, long before visible change appears. God, for those who feel emotionally numb or disconnected, unsure what they feel or why, we ask for gentle reconnection, not an overwhelming flood of emotion, but a gradual return of sensation, curiosity, and responsiveness. Let numbness soften at a pace that feels safe. God, we bring to you relationships that have left marks on our hearts, relationships that have caused us to close off or protect ourselves. We ask for healing that does not erase memory, but that loosens the hold of pain. Help us learn again how to engage without constant fear of harm. Help us trust discernment without defaulting to isolation. God, for those who feel responsible for holding everything together, for being strong for others while neglecting themselves, we ask for relief from that burden. Let assurance remind them that they are not the foundation of everything they care about. They are supported too. God, we bring our inner narratives to you, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. We ask that false narratives shaped by fear or disappointment would lose their authority. Replace them slowly with truth that feels gentle rather than confrontational. Truth that brings rest rather than pressure. God, for those struggling with sleep, with nights that feel long and restless, we ask for peace that invites rest naturally. Not forced sleep, but sleep that arrives when the body feels safe enough to let go. Let the mind release its grip on unresolved questions. Let the body settle into the present moment. God, we ask for healing for those carrying grief, whether recent or long held. Grief that has not been fully expressed. Grief that resurfaces unexpectedly. And we ask that your presence would be a steady companion in that process, offering comfort without rushing resolution. God, for those who feel spiritually discouraged, unsure whether they are doing enough or believing correctly, we ask for reassurance that relationship is not measured by performance. Let them know they are welcomed as they are, even in uncertainty, even in doubt, even in weariness. God, we bring to you the desire for control that has kept us tense and vigilant. We acknowledge how deeply ingrained it has become. Tonight we practice releasing it in small ways, trusting you with outcomes we cannot predict. We place tomorrow in your care. We place unfinished tasks in your care. We place unanswered questions in your care. God, we ask for healing of the inner critic that speaks harshly and persistently. And we ask that its volume would decrease, replaced by a quieter, kinder inner voice, a voice that encourages patience rather than perfection. God, for those who feel stuck in cycles that repeat despite effort, we ask for reassurance that cycles can be broken gently without force. We ask for wisdom that comes through awareness and safety rather than urgency. God, we ask for a deep sense of inner rest that remains even after this moment ends. Rest that does not depend on circumstances being ideal. Rest that stays with us into daily life, into decisions, into relationships. God, we thank you for the healing that has already begun in subtle ways. We trust that you continue working beyond what we can see or measure. We rest in the assurance that we are not alone in this process, not abandoned, not forgotten. And we choose to remain here a little longer, breathing slowly, allowing peace to settle where it can, trusting that even now you are bringing wholeness in ways that honor our humanity and our limits. We remain in this quiet assurance, held, seen, and cared for without needing to strive, without needing to rush, resting in the truth that your presence is enough. Beloved friend, as this time of prayer gently comes to a close, nothing is being taken away from you, and nothing is being required of you. What has been placed before God tonight does not need to be picked back up. You do not need to carry it with you into the next moment or the next day. This is a space of completion, not because everything has been resolved, but because everything that needed care has been entrusted. You may notice a sense of quiet settling in your body, a softness that was not there before, and if you do, there is no need to hold on to it or analyze it. Simply allow it to be. Rest does not need to be protected. It sustains itself when it is welcome. If your thoughts are still drifting in and out, that is okay. They do not need to stop for rest to deepen. They can slow naturally, like waves easing as the night grows calmer. You are not required to stay alert. You are not required to stay focused. This moment allows you to release effort altogether. As you lie here or sit quietly, you can let your breathing become slower and more natural, not forced, not controlled, just steady and easy. With each breath, your body remembers that it is safe enough to rest. With each moment, the urgency that followed you through the day loses its grip. You are not falling behind by resting. You are not neglecting anything by letting go. You are allowing yourself to receive what you were always meant to receive, care without conditions. There is a deep assurance present now, even if it feels subtle. Assurance does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet confidence that nothing needs to be done right now. And sometimes it arrives as the permission to sleep without fear of what tomorrow holds. You do not need to rehearse the day ahead. Tomorrow will meet you with enough strength for itself. You do not need to revisit what has already passed. The past does not require your attention tonight. This is a moment outside of effort, outside of evaluation, outside of expectation. If sleep begins to come, you can allow it to come naturally without resistance. You do not need to hold on to these words. They do not disappear when you rest. They have already done their work by guiding you into safety. If sleep does not come immediately, that is also okay. Rest is still happening. Your nervous system is settling. Your heart is easing out of vigilance. You are learning again how to be still without bracing for impact. There is nothing fragile about this rest. It does not break easily. It does not vanish the moment you stop paying attention. It stays with you because it is grounded in care rather than effort. You may feel your body growing heavier, supported by whatever is beneath you, held without needing to hold itself. You may notice your thoughts becoming less detailed, less demanding, drifting without urgency. This is not loss of control. This is trust taking shape quietly. You are not being watched or evaluated. You are not expected to remain aware. You are free to rest fully. Through the night you are kept. Through the hours you are unaware, you are not alone. Care does not pause when you sleep. Guidance does not disappear when you rest. You do not need to stay awake to make sure things are okay. They are already being tended. And as the night continues, you can let go of the need to understand what has changed. You do not need to name it or measure it. Something gentle has already shifted simply because you allowed yourself to stop striving. That is enough for now. There will be time later for clarity, for movement, for decisions. This moment is for rest alone. You may imagine setting everything down beside you, responsibilities, concerns, unanswered questions, placing them out of reach for the night. They will still be there tomorrow, but they do not belong in your hands right now. Right now, your only task is to rest. If your body moves towards sleep, allow it. If your mind wanders, let it wander. You are not required to stay present. You are allowed to drift. As this time ends, there is no abrupt stopping point. The quiet continues. The safety remains. When the assurance stays with you, you are free to sleep deeply, peacefully, without fear of missing anything important. You are held in care that does not sleep, watched over without effort on your part. And as you rest, you can trust that when you wake, you will do so with what you need for the next step, even if you do not know yet what that step will be. For now, you are finished. You are safe. You are free to rest.